Hi, my name is Nicholas, and I'm a senior psychology and sociology major at the University of Science and Arts of Oklahoma. This is about the 37th or 38th take of this, so I'll try not to mess it up. I chose to participate in this project because I believe it incorporates a lot of the themes that we've talked about in our world, thought, and culture. Three course. Change being a big component of the history of the world, and more specifically art. We examine the changes throughout the evolution of art from the Baroque era to the more modern performance art pieces, which the performance art is what you're going to be seeing today. Not only will this piece of art today incorporate change, but it also incorporates the theme of the fragmented self, which we discussed earlier in the semester. The fragmented self being sort of a byproduct of the creation of new art forms. Because although we create these new art forms that drastically differ from the current art form that provokes the creation of it, because it's usually created out of some sort of backlash or in contrast to the current art. So we create these arts, and it creates these subsections of art, or these subcategories. And although they are very different, they're still considered art. Sculpture, which is the beginning product of today's performance art piece, and performance art itself are very different conceptualizations of art and performances. So, although they're very different, they're still both very big components of this ever-changing and ever-expanding and ever-fragmenting, if you will, art world. And that's all I have.
Hi, my name is Jo. I'm a senior art major here at the University of Science and Arts of Oklahoma. This is my media project. I have wanted to do this for a really long time, basically since my sophomore year when I had to do Sculpture 2. Now Sculpture 2 is a class at the university that all art majors have to take. In this class, you have to do sculpture, or bust as we call it in the art world, of your own face. Traditionally, this method of making art was meant to get you a job. In the Renaissance period, where its origins are the strongest, I would say, you had to be able to show a bust that you had made of yourself to prove that you could model from real life. And this is what got you commissions, and commissions was obviously your livelihood. So we've passed that art down, and it's still done today, not at every university, but at ours, because we focus a lot on the traditional arts. This specific class is very important in the eyes of our head of the department to help students ingrain and integrate their design skills, drawing skills, and sculpting skills all into one. At the beginning of the semester, you have to do a lot of drawing of your own head. Make sure you get your measurements correct. There's a lot of math, which sucks because all our art majors hate math. So you have to do a lot of math. You got to do a lot of measurements. Make sure that the head is going to be the correct size after it's fired in a kiln. There's some shrinkage and stuff with clay. So then you have to draw it out. Then you have to start sculpting it, and you have to do all kinds of measurements of your own head with special tools before you begin sculpting. Now, while I understand that this process is very important and it does help students, I hated it thoroughly. I believe that staring at your own face for 2 hours, 3 times a week in a mirror is really torture. You discover every flaw that you ever had or you didn't know you had, and then you have to put it in clay so for everyone else to see it as well. Really sucks. Did not enjoy it in the slightest. And then it gets fired and you get to take home a sculpture of your own head. Yay! So mine has been sitting in my apartment, first in the annex because I didn't want to take it home. Then my professor made me take it home, and it's been sitting in my apartment just kind of staring at me, really creepy. So it just been driving me nuts. So I turned it to face the wall for a while, but it was still bothering me, and I wanted to take a hammer to it every time I looked at it. So I was talking to my fellow student about this, and they told me that I should do something really fun and artistic with it. And I figured, well, what's more fun than blowing something up, right? So the original thought for this was to put some powder in it when we blow it up so you have nice colors. Then they decided that wasn't artistic enough and needed some paint. So we filled up these balloons with paint, stuck them inside the sculpture that you will see, and when it explodes, ideally the paint is going to splatter these canvases that are placed around it. Really excited for this project, really excited to see how it works, but I think it relates to World Thought specifically, World Thought and Culture 3 specifically, by this traditional art becoming something else. We've studied, as the other guys have mentioned, as Nick already mentioned to you, we've studied the progression of art from the Baroque period to Romanticism to modernism and now postmodernism, which performance art falls under. That is, this piece, originally the sculpture, is very much classical art, which we also studied neoclassicism for a while, which is based off classical art. So the sculpture itself definitely applies to this class. The performance art is what we've been studying more often, and how art has changed from that to this. But even though art changes, what was there before is never completely covered up. It just progresses on. Like Nick talked about these fragments of art, or the fragmented self. It's exactly like that. Art fragments off of each other. The movements fragment off of each other, but they're all still there. They're all still part of art, and they all impact each other, and especially Romanticism, it touches everything that follows. So this performance art piece, I hope you guys will really enjoy, but it is based off of that idea of the fragmented self, because obviously we're fragmenting the sculpture, but it's very much based off of taking something traditional and making something completely new out of it. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. We've definitely enjoyed making it.
Hi, my name is Mason Flagg. I'm a senior history major at the University of Science and Arts of Oklahoma. Being a history major, a lot of what we have to study has to do with the changes that happen in a culture or in military, religion, a lot of different things. But what you find out, the more you study, is that history is constantly changing. You can look at when a new military technique comes out, like the invention of firearms, and that completely took away any use that we had of spears, swords, unless you're like a cavalryman, things like that. The most modern example of something like this happening that I can, not the most modern, but the most important, I think, was the invention of the printing press. Prior to the invention of the printing press, the way in which works were copied was you had one man who would be in a room in a monastery probably, and his entire job, what he did every day, was he wrote, you can see my hand, just wrote using his hand, and that was it. That was the only way you had to copy any work, most notably the Bible, which would be about the longest thing they would do. Because of how long it would take, and because of the materials that were used in doing it, books were expensive, they were rare, they would last a long time, well, kind of a long time, but they were rare and they were very expensive, so not a lot of people had them. And so if you had any information that you needed to get out, it was hard to do that. But then in 1439, Johann Gutenberg comes out with the printing press, and what that did was, instead of you having to write with your hand, you just had to pull a lever, press it down, and it would print it on a piece of paper for you. And it was still a tedious process of having to arrange all the letters and press them down, but it was a lot faster and a lot more economical than writing it by hand. What this did was it allowed for information to be more readily available. It had an impact on universities, on education, on scholarship, on religion through the Reformation. It impacted its entire culture and its entire world with its use. Information would go out so much faster, so much easier. Books were cheaper for college students to buy, which we probably
would appreciate the process that they had back in the day. But it was a major ordeal, and it was one that was met with some favorable reviews and some that were criticized. People that appreciated the old way of doing things, especially like monks and monasteries, that didn't like it. But we now, being 500 years almost removed from it, or over 500 years, I think, we can appreciate the value it had. But one can argue that even that technology, which was so revolutionary for the time, is even possibly going away with what we are in right now, which is in the digital age, where books are just not printed at all. They're just left online, things like that. Or we have mass printers where, we don't even use a regular press anymore. We have just a regular digital printer. We can hook it up to a computer, press a button, and it just busts out 20 pages in a few minutes. So even that technology, which had a tremendous impact in its own right, is possibly going away. And that's just one of the many examples that we find throughout history where something new comes along, replaces the old, and then, sometimes it works, sometimes it fails. But in the case specifically of the printing press, and in all the examples that we have through art where things changed and they stuck. So this is not unlike changes that we've seen in art, that we've seen where we went from Baroque to, we eventually get to the Romantic period, and then we get on up into modernism and now in performance art, where people are using different techniques. It's a different style with each period. It's a very different style that you can see. But also in literature too, you can see kind of the trend. This idea or trend of change is also present in literature through different styles, whether we are talking about Romantic literature or Gothic, which is related to Romantic literature. And then we've come farther and farther to where we have novels, newspapers, short stories, comic books, all these different examples that wouldn't be possible without something like printing being invented. We have the Bible that is translated in many different languages, other religious texts like the Quran. All these things, these ideas, these worldviews have been able to be spread farther and to all ends of the earth because we had printing, because they were able to be easily printed, and it was cheap, it was economical, and they were able to go and spread into all these different places. And so that's all I have.
So postmodern art, the artists are very much about throwing out the traditional art and finding new, creative, innovative ways to communicate with art. This is where performance art comes in, and that's a lot of what I was trying to do with this art piece. I do believe there is a place for traditional art. Like I talked about a little bit in the Renaissance, if you were a Renaissance artist, you had to be able to prove that you could do this to make a livelihood. Clearly, that is not the case now. It's not needed anymore, it's not necessary, it's a valuable skill, and many people have gone into a career using artwork like this. You can go into careers such as forensic sculptor. So you would make a bust of someone's face from bones, from their bone structure. That kind of thing. That's really cool. Definitely not what I'm planning on doing. I think it's really cool if you can do that. But while I think this is a valuable piece of art, I don't think it's necessary for everyone. And I definitely didn't feel that it was necessary for me. If I'd been able to work off somebody else's face, I might have felt a little bit differently about it. But since I was working off my own, I found it very uncomfortable, learned way too much about myself, I really did enjoy the process, and I wanted to make something completely new out of this. I wanted to make something that I could enjoy, something new out of the old. So with this artwork, I really wanted to draw a parallel between postmodernism and the movement, how postmodernism came to be. So modernism was very much, it has to be this way, we're going to strip art down to the very basics that it can be, and the postmodernists went, no. We want to blow up the art world as it is. We want all new things, all new ideas, all new expressions. And I really wanted to draw a parallel with this piece by showing, hey, I'm literally blowing up traditional art because I want to make something completely new. Something I've never tried before, but I'm really enjoying. Something that communicates in a whole different way. It's like when postmodernism came out of modernism, it was literally trying to go against everything else. They had to do something entirely different because there was nowhere else for them to go after modernism. And I kind of felt like in this class, there was nowhere else for me to go with that bust. I hated it. I couldn't do anything with it, I felt, until I was talking with a friend about performance art and how you can make something entirely new, and how she revitalized her love for art by going into performance. So I figured, hey, I'm gonna try it too.
We good?
Yep.
Alright, fire in the hole.
So the artwork that came about from this project is a little bit of a mixed media work. It's kind of hard to see in the video, but the sculpture had little balloons inside that were filled with paint. So when we blew it up, this paint was supposed to splatter onto the canvases. It did onto some of them, missed a lot, but not all of the balloons exploded. And after going through the effort of putting all the paint in the balloons, I really wanted all of them to explode. So after we blew up the sculpture, we hung them onto the canvases and shot them to get the splatter paint effect. So that is how the artwork came about. It's a mixture of explosion and gunshots, but I think it looks pretty cool. Splatter paint at its finest.
Hi, my name is JD and I assisted with the explosives for this project. For this shot we used a half-pound charge of tannerite, which is a commercial binary rifle target. It's composed of ammonium nitrate and aluminum dust. The two substances by themselves are very safe, not reactive at all. When put together, they won't react unless exposed to a very high caliber rifle round like the one we used. This shot was taken from a Winchester Model 70-30-06 from about 75 to 80 yards. I used a 7-power scope on the shot. The rifle was originally given to me by my great-grandfather. It's something I'm very comfortable using. And we made sure while we took the shot that everybody was at a safe distance. We placed the shot so that no shrapnel would be sprayed at any of the crowd that was watching. Made sure that it was a very directional shot into a safe area. And I think the results ended up really well. It was fun to watch and it was fun to participate in. I was glad to help out.